Hi, everybody. Of course, we're doing a little bit live today. We have a lot to cover on Russia and what's been going on over there. What are the risks? What does the future look like as well with all of this new technology? Because we've got these new machines out there called Starlink. You might have heard of those. And what does that actually mean? What's Elon Musk doing? He's certainly been in the news a lot lately. And I guess that's ultimately a very good thing. But what does it mean when he talks about, for instance, fuel and, we need to drill here? This is a guy that sells electric cars. So should we listen to him? Interesting question. And what's going on right now in Ukraine with Starlink? So we're going to cover some of that. We're going to talk about ICANN, and that's the international organization that keeps track of domains, what should be happening with Russia, and a whole lot more. So here we go. You get to watch me behind the scenes for my radio show that's heard throughout the entirety of New England. So thanks for all of the stations that carry me. This is pretty darn cool. Okay, here we get going. There is a whole bunch going on when it comes to Russia, of course, invasion of Ukraine. We're going to talk about that. And what is ICANN? How does this domain system work? And why are people calling to have .ru deleted? Hi, everybody. Craig Peterson here. Thanks for joining me today. I am your Chief Information Security Officer, and you're listening to News Radio, WGAN AM 560 and FM 98.5. Join me on the Morning Drive, Wednesday mornings at 7:34. We'll keep you up to date right here. This is really a big deal, and if you're watching from home, let me go full screen on this article. This is an article from Ars Technica, and I've been talking about it all week, which is that ICANN won't revoke Russian internet domains, says the effect would be devastating. This is frankly pretty darn fascinating to me because ICANN is this international organization. It was put together in order to help make the internet international. Now, I'm not talking about the data international, but control of it. A lot of countries were complaining because, of course, the internet was created in the United States. It was created by U.S. taxpayers' money for the DoD, and it was designed to be very, very resilient. In fact, so resilient that there could be a nuclear blast, and that nuclear blast ends up causing problems, but the internet's still going to work. And the whole idea behind it was you could have multiple routers. They're all talking to each other. Nowadays, they're talking BGP4, and they can say, how can I get from here to there? So the idea behind BGP is they all share this information. What's the least cost way? What's the easiest way, cheapest way, if you will, for me to get from point A to point B? And it changes. It changes all of the time. So you might be on a phone conversation. You might be listening to me right now online, streaming or watching the video. You might be doing who knows what out there with digital communications, but the communications channel that you think you're using, where the data is going from, let's say, my microphone ultimately to your device, your ears, that data path, once it becomes data, can be changing multiple times a second. Now, it actually changes quite a bit initially as these internet backbone routers send least cost routing information back and forth, to and fro. Very good thing, frankly, because it helps to speed everything up. And there's other tricks that we're using. You might have seen, for instance, Akamai and some of the URLs before of sites that you've gone to. And that's called a content delivery network, and that helps get the content to be closer to you. So if you're on a website in California and you're in New Hampshire, that website video, that website graphic, etc., is going to be coming from a server local to me here in New Hampshire. right? That's how that all is supposed to work. So we have names. You guys know about that, internet domain names. And those domain names, you already know, those are turned into internet addresses. And those addresses are then used by the routers to figure out where to go, how to get the data there. The problem that we're having right now, of course, is Russia seems to be substantially abusing the internet. Putin put a kill switch onto the Russian internet some time ago. And the idea behind this kill switch was, hey, listen, if we don't want the world to be talking to us, we'll just cut it off. Now, he's tested it a couple of times, but what he has not done is shut it down. And he hasn't shut it down as part of this Ukraine war. What they did is they passed laws saying, hey, if you publish something that disagrees with what we're saying, you get 15 years in prison. And even these people who've been protesting on the streets, they're getting about 60 days, 30 to 60 days in jail just for protesting what's going on. So a lot of people have been saying, well, why don't we turn off the Russian internet? No, we're not going to use Putin's kill switch in order to shut it all off. We're not going to do, a few things we decided not to do, denial of service attacks, etc. Although there are hackers doing that, and we are going to talk about that today. But they're saying, well, let's just go ahead and let's kill their .ru. Right, the country domain. And the guy who heads it up said, hey, listen, our mission is just to make sure that the internet works. So shutting off the .ru domain so that no one can go ahead and send, a request out to the domain name servers and get a resolution to an IP address. So if you try and go to, Kremlin.ru or something, you will get blocked. And you'll get blocked, not blocked, not like the Great Firewall of China or of Russia now. They've got one going pretty good. Thank you. You ain't using U.S. technology. It's crazy what we've been doing. But what it does is it says, .ru, I don't know. What are you talking about? So there have been a lot of people who have been pushing for it, and you'll see on my screen here that Ukraine's requested to cut Russia off from some of these core parts of the internet, and ICANN, which is the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, couldn't remember what that was earlier, said that ICANN must remain neutral, and their mission, they say, is not to take punitive actions. It's to make sure the internet works. So are they really taking punitive actions if they cut Russia off? It's really interesting to me because look at what has been going on. You've got companies like Facebook as the great example who has gone ahead and just shut off people. They didn't like what they were saying. My goodness, right? At one point, if you said you should wear a mask during this pandemic, you would be cut off from Facebook. And then, of course, if you said no, you shouldn't wear a mask, at that point you would be cut off, right? Because science, right? Science is, we know exactly what we're doing. It goes on and on and on and on. If you said that it came from a lab in China, you would have your account suspended. Now, of course, their whole tune has changed, and it probably came from a lab in China. It's crazy what these people have been doing. So we have arbiters of truth who are some contractors sitting in their home or wherever it is, the contractors for Facebook, that are going through posts that people are flagging as, incorrect, as fake news. So what happens is people say fake news, and then that goes off to their team that then looks at it and says, well, okay, fake news, because we disagree with it. It just blows my mind. We have to have free and fair and open discussions, don't we? So you have that line at Facebook, and Google does some of the same. A lot of these sites do a lot of the same. You get our major media outlets that are all deciding what they want to report on and what they want to label as fake and fake news. Right? I'm just shaking my head because it's hard to believe. What about Russia? Russia is putting out fake news. As I've said many times before, the first casualty in war, right? This isn't my quote. The first casualty in war is what? It's the truth. So if truth is the first casualty, then that means we got a lot of propaganda going on. We had propaganda coming out of Ukraine. We've caught some of those, like the Ghost jet, Ghost fighter pilot, whatever it was, who had killed, 5 Soviet or Russian jets, Soviet era, using Soviet era technology on the part of the Ukrainians. Turns out, okay, well, that was false news. That was fake news. The whole thing about Snake Island, where you had that Russian military, I don't know what it was, a frigate, but anyways, boat sitting there saying, we are Russian warship, you will surrender, or, whatever, right? You remember that? Snake Island, just a small place, 13 guys. And supposedly they shelled it and they killed all 13. Turns out that was probably fake news as well. So that's from the Ukrainian side. And on the Russian side, they hardly reported as to how many deaths there were. In fact, initially, for quite a while, they were saying there are no deaths. And at the same time, the Ukrainians are saying there are 2,500 Russians dead. And that number keeps going up. Who knows what it is today? It gets really crazy in the time of war. So if Facebook is going to stop someone from saying don't wear masks or do wear masks, depending on what day of the week it is, basically, right? Wednesday, it's okay to say that. Thursday, it's not okay to say that, and we're banning you. It's nuts. Well, then why can't that type of censorship move on to the next level? Right, that's the big question I have. Now, should we be shutting it off? I'll pull this back up on the screen again. And this article from Ars Technica is saying that experts have warned, whoever they are, that shutting down the .ru domain is going to cause just incredible problems for Russians, which man would it ever, talking about a major blow to an economy. And it would also cause problems for people who are trying to find out more truth about Russia, because you couldn't get to their sites. Now, we've seen some amazing things in Russia. We had one of the Russian news agencies, RT, which is broadcasting here in the U.S. Their entire staff just walked out saying, forget about it. We're not going to promote this fake news. But this is a legitimate question. Me, personally, I don't think anybody should be censoring anybody for almost anything. There are some limits, but they're pretty extreme in my book. I'd rather know someone is an idiot because they're allowed to say stupid things, right? And counter their arguments. You've got to have discussions. Anyways, stick around. We'll be right back. Okay, there we go. So I had to kind of play around, get things ready there. And I think that's a very, very important question, and I'd like to know what you guys think on this. By the way, I had some people ask again who are watching the video over on YouTube or Rumble, and now I've also put a link to it on some other sites, so you'll find it kind of all over the place. But why do I do an intro for News Radio WGAN? They're not a particularly large station, but the reason I do that is they are the ones carrying the show along with many other stations, so I have to record it using somebody's ID. Why not theirs, right? And then what I'll do, and you guys don't see this, but I'll go in after it's all put together and put in the drops for the other stations. So WGIR, WTAG, AM 1200, the list goes on and on. There's 8 or 10 stations that I'm on. Anyhow, that's what's going on there. So I will be back in just a second here. Let me just do a quick break. Boy, this mess in Russia, it's absolutely incredible. We're going to talk about some of that right now and what some of these U.S. companies are doing. Microsoft, yeah, they've been around a long time. They've been helping us, right? They've had lots of cybersecurity problems. People use Microsoft software on their desktops. Some people use it for servers, which is kind of crazy. But listen to what they're doing now. Hi, I'm Craig Peterson, your Chief Information Security Officer, and you're listening to News Radio, WGAN AM 560 and FM 98.5. I'd like to invite you to join me on Wednesday mornings at 7:34 for The Morning Drive. We'll keep you up to date. This is a little concerning. I'm going to pull this article up on the screen for those of you who are kind of watching along, either on Rumble or YouTube. Ars Technica article. They have some really great articles. This particular one is about our friends at Microsoft. This is kind of cool. Microsoft announced today, well, this was like a week or so ago, that Microsoft would be suspending all new sales of Microsoft products and services in Russia following the country's unjustified, unprovoked, and unlawful invasion of Ukraine. Now, Microsoft didn't give any specifics about the products, but it really is likely to be kind of a blanket ban of all of the Microsoft products. This is very cool because Microsoft has taken an approach I've never seen them do before, which is, okay, when a Mac gets hacked, you get our friends at Apple putting together patches and getting them out. They get them out pretty quick. Microsoft had been doing much the same. The problem was, some months, there were patches every day that you had to apply. Yeah, that's how bad this software is. And they decided that, man, let's be like politicians here. Let's release some very damning news Friday, right about 4:30 p.m. before a long weekend, so no one will notice. Right? Yeah, our friends, the politicians, do that all of the time. What Microsoft decided they'd do is, hey, wait a minute, we're going to have patches. It's not going to slow down because our code is terrible. So what we're going to do, let me see here. How about we just release all of them at once? We'll just call it Patch Tuesday, right? Because people were complaining about how much work it was, how much effort it was to try and update them, these machines, and apply these patches every day. Huge problem for everybody from home users through big companies out there. So Microsoft decided, okay, well, let's do that. Let's bury it so nobody will notice. Well, okay, well, that's what Microsoft does, and now we've gotten used to that. Now, you remember two guys, right? Bill Gates, followed by Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer was a nut job. Bill Gates was a bad man. I think he's just been trying extra hard to compensate for all of the evil he did over the years. But what we're looking at now is new management. And he's been in there now for a few years, doing a great job cleaning up Microsoft, making it a very competitive company. He has done some amazing things. One of the things that he has decided to do that's been very effective is, well, how about this? How about we go ahead and we work with various governments to help stop these Russian hackers. And I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, what was happening. And Microsoft had reached out to the White House and said, hey, listen, we have been looking at the hacks that have been coming from the Russian hackers. And we've been preparing fixes for some of those hacks. How about we work directly with some of these other countries? This reminds me a whole lot of the Lend-Lease program in World War II. You might remember this thing. But the U.S., of course, initially was not involved in the war. And they decided, okay, well, we got to help the United Kingdom. How are we going to help them? The UK doesn't have the money to buy ships, to have us make weapons, bullets, you name it. So what they did is they had people donate their rifles, the guns, ammo from home. Plus, they made them, the government, instead of selling them to the UK, they lent them to the UK because the UK could not afford everything that it needed in order to fight a war against the National Socialists in Germany. So what did they do? We just shipped the stuff over there and called it a lend/lease. I think that's a great idea, and what Microsoft is doing is also a great idea. They have been decoding, reverse compiling, if you will, and interpreting the code, looking at what some of the ransomware and other malicious code that Russia's been using against Ukraine, and they have been providing all kinds of inside information to these other countries. Now, this is a great idea for a few reasons. One of the reasons, and I think kind of maybe the biggest reason, is that the ransomware, the viruses, all of this malware that they're producing is not particularly discriminating. Do you guys remember, maybe, I don't know, what was it, 6 months ago, I told you how to avoid getting most of this Russian ransomware. And it was as easy as just installing a keyboard on your computer, Windows or Mac. Windows, those are the machines that are always getting attacked. Quite successfully most of the time. But the Windows keyboard for Russian language. Now, you didn't even have to use it. You don't have to have a keyboard, right? This isn't a Russian keyboard that I'm holding up here on camera. This is just a regular US keyboard. You can just install a virtual Russian keyboard. And once that keyboard was installed, you're pretty safe. Why? Well, because Vladimir Putin, dictator for life of Russia, decided he would just go ahead and, stop anybody that was trying to hack Russian companies, businesses, government agencies. And what's the best way for the hackers to do that? Because they didn't want to end up in Siberia for the rest of their lives because of a hack. No, they went ahead and said, okay, well, if there's a Russian Cyrillic keyboard on the machine, we're not going to activate. So if the software, the malware got on your computer, all you need to do is have a Russian keyboard, virtual. Yeah, that's it. Pretty simple. I told you that months ago. Now what we're seeing is these indiscriminate types of software that are being used in Ukraine. Why doesn't the keyboard trick work? Well, some Ukrainians speak Russian. We could go in to the background on that, of the massacre, the starvation, purposeful starvation of Ukrainians by the Soviet Union over many years ago, right? And how they then gave their property, their homes, to Russians to move into in order to occupy Ukraine. So there's people in Ukraine who are Russian speaking. Of course, now we're talking 2 or 3 generations, 4 maybe, down the road from when the Soviet Union killed all of those millions of people. But there, suffice it to say, there's Russian-speaking people there. Let me put it that way, particularly in southeastern Ukraine. Anyways, I'm kind of going on and on. This is not an education on war or history. We're talking about cybersecurity. So they being Microsoft, found many cases of Russians putting destructive and disruptive, or even more than that, data wiping malware onto computers. It spreads indiscriminately. So Microsoft, looking at what's happening in Ukraine, trying to get patches together for all of us, letting other countries know about what's going on, is going to be amazing. Because this malware, which is wiping computers primarily, it's not really just straight up ransomware. Give us money and we'll give you your data back. This is destroying your data. That malware is going to leak outside of Ukraine. cause us all kinds of potential problems. When we get back, I want to talk about this here. This is our friend Elon Musk, and we've been kind of following along with some of the stuff been going on with his new satellite system in Ukraine. Stick around. All right, everybody, we got that. Let me do a little quick adjustment. We'll save this out, and it is ready for the radio. So let's see here. Let me know, by the way, would you like to have this just running in the background while I do all of this? It takes a few minutes. Lately, I've just been saying, no, I'm just going to stop it and then pick up again just before I start. So me at craigpeterson.com goes to me, and you can send me an email. Let me know what you think. So I'm going to pause it right now, and then we'll be right back. All right, here we go with Mr. Musk. The whole concept of these satellites encircling the Earth, providing us with internet, just regular guides, it's going to be in our smartphones, is changing everything. We're going to talk about Elon Musk and what's happened over in Ukraine. Hi, I'm Craig Peterson, your Chief Information Security Officer, and you're listening to News Radio, WGAN AM 560 and FM 98.5. Hey, you can join me on the Morning Drive Wednesday mornings at 7:34. We'll keep you up to date. Well, our friend Elon Musk has done a lot of things over the years. He has really helped us, frankly, the Tesla and what's been happening there, SpaceX, his main concern being let's get man off of a single planet onto multiple planets, right? The movement to Mars. NASA's working on a serious moon base. That reminds me of Space 1999. You guys remember that show? Yeah, we're going to have a moon base by then. And it makes a lot of sense, right? So who's going to go to these? Well, there's some interesting lotteries. People have to apply and everything else. But he's done so much, right? He's got the Boring Company. You already know about Tesla. Boring Company, in case you didn't know, makes underground tunnels. He has also done a few other things. He's got a huge battery manufacturing facility. They're working on new battery technologies to make all of our lives a little bit better, particularly if we have an electric house or electric car. Because what good is it to have electricity that you can't use, right? And that's really what they're trying to do, is make it so that electricity is available 24/7 for you. And the SpaceX, which is what I mentioned, as well as what we're going to talk about right now. I'm going to pull this up on my screen for those of you who are watching over on Rumble or, of course, YouTube. This is fascinating. He said there's a high probability of Russian attacks on Starlink in Ukraine. Now, that is fascinating because what he's done is he has sent over truckloads. I'm showing a picture of a truck, in fact, with these Starlink terminals in it that's from Ars Technica. Just double checking it here. But this is very cool. This is posted by the Vice Prime Minister over there in Ukraine, and they are talking about these terminals. Now, a terminal in this case is something that allows your devices to talk to the Starlink satellites. There's going to be a huge constellation. They've got 2,000 satellites up, and they're putting another 12,000 up. These types of satellites are much different than what we've been used to over the years. We typically we've had these massive things sitting up in space. I worked with RCA Aerospace many years ago, and I saw the testing facilities, which are just incredible. They had this huge vacuum chamber that they brought me in to see as we were working on space shuttle software. Yeah, I wrote software that they used to put the space shuttle together. Yeah, way back in the day. So that was a pretty proud moment. Anyways, we're not talking about these huge satellites like they used to launch. We're talking about very small satellites. And they're not just sitting way up there. These are basically in low orbit around the Earth, and they're geostationary. In other words, they stay in one spot, I believe, is the way they've got these things set up. So these satellites then allow, because they're so close to the Earth, allow them to use less power. And also, the other advantage to that is the delay, right? The delay between having to send it all the way up and back down, because electricity takes time, right? Yeah, it travels at the speed of light. But nowadays, you might have noticed, it can take a quarter second, half a second when you're talking to someone. When I'm on the radio with some of these radio stations, the delay can be absolutely incredible, like a half second to a second sometimes. And that's just because they're being cheap. Anyhow, this type of technology where you have these constellations, and it isn't just Elon Musk, it isn't just Starlink, but constellations with, well, ultimately we'll have tens of thousands of satellites up there. Not, there's all kinds of other potential problems. Not getting into that right now. But what it does mean is you can communicate. And we've never had this sort of thing before. We had the U.S. military, the Navy, in fact, put together a communication system that lives on top of the internet, called nowadays generically the dark web. And it was set up to allow our military, our State Department, to be able to communicate with people in countries that are, back in the day, under Soviet control, all kinds of potential problems. So whenever those problems existed, they just went ahead and used this onion network, right, which is part of the dark web, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we had before. Now, what happens if you're a country like Ukraine, where 100% of your internet comes from Russia? Russia obviously can sit there and kind of listen in. Hopefully your encryption's good. A lot of Russians have been using Telegram in order to get real news about what's happening in their country and other places. And Telegram is not that secure, frankly. WhatsApp, pretty secure. Signal is the one you want to pay close attention to. Signal is considered to be the most secure of all of these secure communications apps. But there's a level above all of that, because if they can tell that you're communicating, even that is enough to give them some information. So they might not know what was in that transmission, but if the transmission is all of a sudden tons of activity coming over, lots of data, lots of messages going back and forth, they can kind of say, well, maybe there's something about to happen. That came out, you might remember the old Orange book for security way back in the 80s, I think is when it came out. But part of what you had to do was cover up your actual real communication. So it's one thing to have the communications encrypted, but you wanted to always have about the same amount of communications going back and forth so people couldn't kind of figure out what you're doing. Now, with these types of devices, that kind of problem still exists. And this is part of what Elon Musk is warning about here. Pull it up on my screen again for those people who are watching. Elon Musk is urging users of his satellite system to put their Starlink antennas as far away from people as possible. Now, why would he be doing that? Well, because, frankly, that terminal is transmitting to the satellite as well as receiving from the satellite, and it is entirely possible that there could be some evil software that is listening in for the satellite transmissions and sends a little missile your way. Also, of course, the Russians have satellites in space that can look down on the ground. Now, something as small as a terminal for Starlink, a little hard to see. But Elon Musk is saying, hey, listen, guys, go ahead and camouflage it. You might want to spray paint it. Just don't use metallic paint so that they can't see it, and place it as far away from where people are as possible. So you can still use it, and only use it when you need to use it. Don't keep it up and running all of the time. But this is the start of something great. something where you can't easily block people's communication. So Russia has tried to do that. And they have been jamming the Starlink satellites. So what did Musk do? He diverted all of his engineers to working on how can we get around the Russian jamming. And according to Elon Musk, they have gotten around it. And they now have their satellite systems completely jam-free from the Russians. I think that's fascinating. They're probably using some good spread spectrum technology that was actually known about in World War II. And we could talk about that for a long time. Hetty, you might remember her. Anyways, skip that for now. Stick around. We got more when we come back. A whole bunch of pandemonium out there because of what Russia's been doing in Ukraine and how it's flowing over to us as well. Hey, this is not great news. All right, everybody, we got that one done. I like it when a plan comes together. This is weekly show number 1156. Can you believe that? I've been on the air for that long, very long time. So this was Elon Musk, high probability of Russian attacks on Starlink. In fact, he was right. As I said, we saw Russian attacks on Starlink, didn't we? Okay, I'll be right back. All right, we are back. We're going to talk a little bit about this pandemonium that's been going on. Again, this is another Ars Technica article. They've had a lot of good stuff lately. So let me see here. I need to set this up. I want to... Where did that go? It disappeared on me. So if I click on this... I cannot find... Show library, mixer, sorter, list pads, loop, customize control bar, toolbar. Huh. I don't know why this doesn't want to show up. Well, I guess we will leave this one alone. Because this is bizarre. Okay, guys, sorry. It's always something when it comes to technology, isn't it? Pandemonium is the name of the game over there in Russia, and they are being very successful. We're going to talk about what happened in Belarus. We'll talk a little bit about what happened in Ukraine with cybersecurity and what's happening right here, right now. Hi, I'm Craig Peterson, your Chief Information Security Officer, and you're listening to News Radio, WGAN AM 560 and FM 98.5. I'd like to invite you to join me on The Morning Drive, Wednesday mornings at 7:34. Matt and I will bring you up to date on all of the latest news and technology, right? Yeah, that's the way that goes. I'd also like to invite you guys, of course, you can listen to me on all kinds of apps out there, including the TuneIn app and many others. Let me get my screen set up, because now you can also catch me on Rumble and on YouTube. This is almost a complete, let me pull this up for you. There we go. Complete Ars Technica day. They've got some great articles this week kind of looking into the Russians. What are they doing? What kind of problems is that causing us? But we are seeing some interesting attacks back on Russia. And back in a very, very big way. You know, Russia has been going after Ukraine in the cyberspace for a long time. We spoke a few years ago about what Russia had been doing with the tax software for Ukraine. We don't do this in the U.S. or in Canada, but a number of European countries do. Where you have to have the official tax preparation software put together by the government for your business or for your person, depending on the country you're living in. France is a great example of this, and Ukraine's another one. So Ukraine says, hey guys, you got to go ahead and use our software. That means every business in Ukraine is using their software to manage their tax payments and their accounts, frankly. And that wonderful little piece of software was hijacked by our friends in Russia. So they grabbed a hold of it. They injected some code into it that added ransomware to their software. So now all of the businesses in Ukraine are pretty much guaranteed to be using this hacked software. We have a client who has offices over in France, and we found a really interesting problem with them because the French software that was being used for taxes for French businesses had an extra little problem. And that extra problem was it was insecure as can be. Whoever wrote this must have taken a Microsoft programming course and had no idea about the consequences of what they were doing. So it was very, very insecure. It was using a version of SSL, which is an encryption that's based on another type of encryption. I don't want to get too wonky here, but that was just one of its many problems, and bad keys, etc., etc. So, and keys, by the way, it was using keys that had been revoked, which you should never do. So, bottom line, oh my gosh, hey, if you want more information on this, just drop me a note, me@craigpeterson.com. And you can also get my newsletter with all kinds of great little tips, me@craigpeterson.com. Just let me know. So in this case, we had to help that company in France ignore the security restrictions that were on their system so they could use the French tax system. So anyways, I told you that so I could tell you that the same thing happened to Ukraine. Well, in a different way, their software was pre-infected, so when they downloaded it, ta-da, they got that piece of ransomware, that virus that spread. It was just a nightmare. And of course, it robbed, if you will, Ukraine government of funds that it would have been getting. So we've had now a bit of a shift. I'm going to pull this up on the screen again, this article, because what this shift has shown is that the hackers are now operating on the side of Ukraine, which is just fascinating. So the group called Anonymous, you might be familiar with them. Of course, they've been doing a lot of hacking for a lot of years, releasing private information, government information, right, all of that sort of stuff. And they have amassed what they're calling a volunteer IT army. And this IT army has been going and doing what? Well, hacking Russian sites, apparently. So this article is just absolutely fascinating, and they pulled some of it from Wired as well. But the Russian Space Research Institute, their website was hacked. Leaked files that were stolen from the Russian Space Agency made it all the way onto the internet. The space agency was hacked and their website said, "Leave Ukraine alone, else Anonymous will you up even more." They also did what's called a DDoS attack, which is a distributed denial of service attack. Those can be very difficult to protect against unless you're set up in advance to help protect yourself. And that pretty much destroyed Russia's .ru top level domain. So we've talked about how domain services work, right? So .ru is kind of like .com, except .ru is for Russia. And so the domain name servers that handle .ru were knocked off the air because no one could really get to them. They used amplifying attacks and stuff without getting into all of the details. So basically they were trying to cut off access, and they did for a lot of people, to any domain that ended in .ru. It's great. These are just some of the latest in the surge of hacktivism that's been going on. One of the ones I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, with the Belarusians deciding they were going to hack the Belarus Railroad, which is being used to bring Russian troops, supplies, tanks, etc., all on rail, right, down right to the border of Ukraine. So that was hacked, so that they couldn't use it in order to go after Ukraine. Of course, Russia was able to get to Ukraine, but there's also been protests around the world. 48 Russian cities raised millions of dollars through cryptocurrency donations. Now, you know I'm not a big cryptocurrency guy, and I'm not a big cryptocurrency guy because, well, cryptocurrency is likely to be outlawed by most, if not all, governments, and they certainly could shut it down, and it is not anonymous, all right? So using cryptocurrency does not mean, it does not equate to completely anonymous. But they have done a lot of donations there, big companies, including, we just talked earlier about Microsoft, but also Apple, Shell, BP, McDonald's, Starbucks, right? And these hacktivists have really joined in. And we talked about a couple of other things. So this is kind of messy here, because even more than in peacetime, these active combats that are really happening right now, rendering hacktivism ineffectual and largely just distracting, because we are now in a hot war, right? Now, maybe we don't have our airplanes bombing Russian movements or other things, but there is a kinetic war going on over there. There are bullets, etc., being exchanged. So the hacktivist efforts have been, visible. There's no question about that. But what have they done? See, that's an advantage to being a country like Russia or like the Ukraine, because both of those countries, their industrial base, the military industrial base, is not heavily automated, unlike ours, right? So what could you do? What can you shut down? So what? You shut down the Russian space agency's website. How far did you get into it? Probably not very far. We also have a couple of groups, and we talked about these guys many times, the Conti group, which has been just terrible at hurting U.S. businesses, individuals, government agencies and stuff. The Cumin Project. Both of them have declared their allegiance to Russia. You might remember a few weeks ago we talked here about how we have had some researchers track down most of these Russian hacker groups and their money, and they all ended up in one building in Moscow. That should tell you something, right? In fact, the most expensive real estate right there in downtown Moscow, the tallest building, etc. So these groups getting together in order to protect the fatherland there in Russia, interesting problem, right? How much of this is really controlled by the Kremlin? It's a very, very good question. Conti was kind of dismantling its infrastructure. Some of their top people were arrested by Putin's military, well, not military, but police state over there. And that was interesting, too. That was, again, before the invasion. But why would Putin be shutting them down? Well, apparently they said some things that they shouldn't have said, so now they've come out and have decided they're going to support Russia in its entirety. Now, we mentioned Microsoft and how Microsoft has decided they are going to protect other countries as well as Ukraine, at least as far as the Russian malware goes, and they've been very active in that. And there are a number of cybersecurity companies and other organizations that have released free versions of some of their software. These digital defense tools, free offerings to help Ukrainians defend the networks. Google says its human rights focused DDoS protection service, Project Shield, is now in use by more than 150 Ukrainian websites. So it's very good, bottom line. Pravda, by the way, published this massive trove of personal data, allegedly identifying 120,000 Russian soldiers deployed in Ukraine. That was Ukrainian Pravda, not the good old Russian Soviet Pravda. Man, I remember I bought one of those on a newsstand in Canada once, and I had a friend who was from Yugoslavia, and he said, "Oh, can I show that to my wife?" And he showed it to his wife. She tore it up. I said, "I want my Pravda." CraigPeterson.com. Oh, man, Miroslav, that was his name. I remember that. And he was so apologetic because it was just full of nothing but propaganda, showing how all Americans are drunk on the street. And they had pictures of some homeless people who looked probably to be drunk, right? And it was just everything they could do to rip on the United States of America. So anyhow, thank you guys for joining us today. Let me know what you think. Just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. See if we can't refine this a little bit more. Take care. Bye-bye.